Okay, so this time I want to have a quick chat about the length of the car. Before I do that, there was something I forgot to mention in the previous video, and that's about these front steerings. Now they are they're really pretty design, really functional. Looks really good. Now there's something you could do with this if you're interested in really customizing. In here, if you see those two screw heads, now if you wanted to make a 4x4 with four-wheel steering, or yeah, with four-wheel steering, either dual or single motor setup, if you have two of these kits, you could cut just behind those screws. So you'd be cutting probably in front of this post here. You cut the chassis. You need two of them, two front sections. Then you can mount them to the same screw holes with two front end sections. You can have double motor and have four-wheel steering, and it would actually be a pretty cool looking crawler if you did that. And it would most certainly improve the steering radius of this car to have four-wheel steering, but that's just an interesting mod you could do. The other thing I want to mention is these arms are not very strong, so it does tend to, as you can see, flex a little bit, which is unfortunate. It's not the best. It's not one of the best methods, but unfortunately there's not really any other way of strengthening it unless they were to not use the ball rod connector. And that would mean making a arm out probably from both sides in order to strengthen it, to prevent it from wobbling like that. And the last thing to mention is that the car tends to have an automatic towing based on the suspension. So as the suspension goes down, the tow will increase, as you can see just there. Or if we do it from the top, we can do this. You can see how it spreads itself automatically as the suspension travels. So that's just a couple of things of note for that. Yeah, I'm going to measure it up against the Land Rover Defender. So what I'm going to do, I'll put the Land Rover Defender. Let's do it. So it's bumper to bumper, I believe. Yep. So as you can see, there is a lot of difference on that. I think it's roughly about 1.5 inches of extra length, I believe, roughly. It's hard to measure it like this because it gets smaller the further away it gets, but let's have a look. So it's rear bumper to rear bumper. And we take a look at the front end here. As you can see, massive length difference. Alright, so I'll show you my custom 8x8 8-wheel drive, 8-wheel steering, which I built using Orlandoo Hunter parts and custom FRP, custom carbon FRP. As you can see, this car is almost exactly the same size. That is crazy. I think it's just a bit shorter because of the size of the wheels on the other one, on my 8x8. It's just, the frame length is pretty much exactly the same from here to here. That is just absolutely crazy. I never would have thought it would be that long. Yeah. So we're not talking about the 8x8, so right. Let's go through the manual, see if there's a couple of things I wanted to note as well. So during the construction process, let's have a look. So nothing special on the first 3 steps there. It's just making the gear assembly. Then here, I want you to assemble it and put the, so this is step 4, yeah, you assemble it. I want you to put the motor in, put the gears in. Now, putting the gears in, this one is very difficult to keep balanced. It wants you to balance this one while putting this one in and fiddling with the bearings. And if you're not careful, you can actually just end up dropping all the gears on the floor, like I did in a live stream the other night. My recommendation is, at this point, is to put the gear shaft in and then put one of the out drives on. That way this part is not going to fall out, and that'll make handling the rest of it much easier. As you see, this is the next stage. So I want you to put the out drives on next. As noted in a previous video though, if you do it after this, you're going to have trouble. Once you put this lower plate on, this area down here is going to be like 3 walls blocking where you put the pin on, and it's going to be extremely difficult. So putting the out drives on is done before you put this plate on. So it's better to do the out drives as part of step 4 rather than step 5. And another thing to note is the motor is hooked on with this little bit of plastic here on the motor casing on all 4 corners. And same on this one here and here. That means that in order to change the motor, you have to break down the entire car, almost. You do have to break down the entire front end. As you can see, there is no way to get the motor out unless you crack the motor casing in half. And to do that is going to require taking the gearbox out completely. You're going to have to detach a lot of this, all the linkages. You're going to have to remove the steering system. You're going to have to remove one of the out drives at least, and that's before you can even start to think of opening the motor casing to get the motor out to change it. So think ahead when you're doing that. Think ahead what motor you want in it. Here we have the making of the steering mechanism, the steering hubs. It's recommending to assemble it, and then it's recommending put the CVDs in after. My advice is put the CVDs in at this point before you put the hub onto the C carrier. If you don't, if you follow the instruction and go to step 9 to put them in, the bearing for the CVD is going to hit on the carrier, and this is already a flimsy part, and you really don't want to risk damaging that. So put the CVDs in at this point and then attach that to the carrier. Where else? So rear assembly, it's pretty much the same as regular. That's just talking about the direction of travel of the gears. Here you can see they had a bit of an accident, some bit of a snafu with the printing. It says 1003, but they've changed it to 1203. The kit doesn't come with any 1003, so just keep that in mind. It's 1203 for those screws.